I can't imagine a universe where anyone but Meryl Streep plays Madeline Ashton. Sorry, my cat is tangled up in my wire. Cat, god
Oh,
damn it.
kitty.
Oh, kitty, you're the worst. Okay.
Oh.
Hello, spookies, and welcome to Rick or Treat Horrorcast, hosted by yours ghoulie, Ricky J. Duarte. My guest is a horror host and representative of the queer horror community. He began hosting on Here TV in 2021, which led to incredible opportunities, including interviews with the likes of John Waters and Cassandra Peterson. He's a member of Gaelica, the Society of Gay and Lesbian Entertainment Critics, and will be making appearances in an upcoming queer horror film, as well as producing some brand new content. Also, for the second year in a row, he's been nominated for a Rondo Award for Best Horror Host. Welcome to the podcast, Stan the Mechanic.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I have one thing to say to you.
Oh.
Now, a warning.
Oh, they're not ready. Indeed.
Oh my God, we are talking about maybe the second most quotable film of all time, the first being Drop Dead Gorgeous, in my opinion. Listen, I'm so happy to have you on the podcast, Stan. Holy cow, we met back in January at the screening of St. Drogo in Brooklyn, and those Monster Makeup Boys have been on the podcast. The current issue of Rue Morgue magazine has my interview with them. I love those guys so much.
Same here. They're so great. I became obsessed with them with Death Drop Gorgeous, and I covered it in my magazine. My day job is as editor of Bear World magazine, but I wrote it up for them, and through that I started talking with them, and we've kept in touch. And when they said they were bringing St. Drogo to New York, I was like, I have to be there. So it was great. By the
Yeah.
way, see it if you can, guys.
And that event was like the who's who of queer horror artists and creators, and
For real, the New York horror glitterati.
we all made our appearances. Well, I'm so curious, and I would love to know more about Stan the Mechanic and where you came from.
Yes. So Stan the Mechanic is a pandemic baby. So, we were looking for things to do, and I had a horrible corporate job that I super, super hated. And thankfully, the one good thing that came out of the pandemic was that I got to exit that gracefully. And I needed to fill my time. And me and my husband had been throwing it around casually for a long time because I would drag him to like horror conventions with me. And we went to one called Scaricon up in Massachusetts, and Cassandra Peterson, aka Elvira Mistress of the Dark, was the headliner. And we met her that day, and we went back to our hotel room, and we were a little bit drunk, as one does at these horror conventions. And we were just kind of brainstorming. And of course, I, like every other queer person, loves the Rocky Horror Picture Show,
Mm.
and Halloween 78 is my all-time favorite film. So I knew I wanted to like do something that required me to wear a jumpsuit, and I wanted it to be campy because I love camp. And so we just spitballed, and we were like, they sing about the satanic mechanic during the Rocky Horror Picture Show. So we were just like, how about Stan the Mechanic? And we just went from there. And Stan is basically the devil's one and only satanic mechanic who has a workshop in Brooklyn, and he's got two assistants called Brad and Janet.
Ah,
Hardy har har. And we watch horror movies from the workshop, and basically his mission is to just cause all sorts of deviousness through automobiles on Earth, a la horror movies like The Car and stuff like that. And it was great. We pitched the idea to Here TV. They liked it. I filmed a couple of episodes around their movies, including Hellbent, which I don't know if anybody out there has seen, but I love it. That's
I
like
have, yeah.
the first queer horror slasher movie.
Hmm.
And then I did David Dakota's Voodoo Academy, which is like some soft core porno with some witchy stuff in it.
Hot.
And
That's my kind of porn.
oh hell yeah. And so after a couple of years up there on Here TV, my contract expired and I went ahead and I'm kind of doing things solo on my website, stanthemechanic.com, where I have some episodes around public domain movies, and it's just all sorts of silliness. I'm what they call in the gay community a bear, so Stan very much leans into his hairiness and his bareness, and so I'm proud to be the first out gay male bear horror host. And I'll be filming more content this year. And you can catch it on my YouTube channel, Stan the Mechanic, or on the website. So exciting stuff coming.
What an honor to be truly the first gay bear horror host. I can't think of another.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure there's other queer horror hosts, but I don't know who's out and who's not. And I
Sure.
know a few horror hosts that are like gay in their private lives, but I just put it out there with the character, so it's very like, earthy and blue, a lot of sex jokes and stuff like that. So, but he found his audience. I mean, Rondo nominated me 2 years running, so and I'm floored by that. So completely honored. That's like in the horror hosting community that's the pinnacle. I mean, we they put us up against like Elvira and Joe Bob and
Yeah.
Svengoolie, so we rarely win, but it is truly an honor to be nominated.
Yeah. Well, how did you find out? Do they email you? Do you just see it with the announcements? How it's such a weird voting process because you copy and paste the ballot and then email it to them. Like it's so I don't want to say sketchy, but it could
But
use an
sketchy.
update. It could use an update,
Yeah, no, they don't let you know. So it's like when other horror hosts start posting, "Hey, I got the nomination," then you click in because I mean, I would vote every year anyway, and I remember last year just casually going in, looking through the list and seeing my name there, and I freaked out. And I flogged it really hard last year, put on a great campaign, didn't win. I think Svengoolie won last year. And then this year, same thing. We know around kind of like mid-March to early April is voting season. And I saw someone put out that they got the nod. I was like, oh, let me see who was nominated this year. And there I was, and I started my campaign. So
It's so
vote for
cool.
me.
You did get my vote. Don't I love my girl Elvira. I love her, but she's got so many awards on her shelf, and you are doing such wonderful things that come on, you deserve it.
Thank you. Yeah, and if you guys out there wanna to vote, just I think it's the Rondo Awards.com, or just Google search it and vote for your man Stan, please.
It's great. You don't have to vote for every single category. So if you didn't see any horror documentaries this year, you don't have to do that one.
Exactly.
I write for Rue Morgue magazine. It got a number of nominations, and so I was happy to support the magazine that I write for. And
Yeah.
this is my first year being in print. Maybe next
Ooh,
year, one of my
yes,
pieces
absolutely.
could be nominated. You never know.
Yeah, big shout out to Rue Morgue as well. They were the first and biggest horror publication to cover Stan when it
That's
came out a
great.
couple of years ago.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was
Excellent.
awesome.
Who were some of your favorite horror hosts growing up? I mean, you said Elvira. That's
Yes.
a given. But who else
You
did you grow up
know,
watching?
yeah, I mean, lie if I say she wasn't the main one, but also like Vampira, she wasn't
Mm.
airing, but like as I was growing up, I discovered Vampira, and whatever clips I can find of her, they're so rare, but they're wonderful. Zachary, who was the first horror host well, Vampire was first. Zachary had the first long-term kind of horror hosting thing. He was great. My goodness, there's so many of them. Mr. Lobo, I love. Who else? Penny Dreadful was great. And I always say, besides the main ones like that, Rod Serling was really one of the first and most successful horror hosts as well. Twilight Zone, what he did there was basically horror hosted, and so did the Crypt Keeper. So those guys too, I always put on my list of favorite horror hosts.
That's a really great point. Rod Sterling was maybe one of my first crushes for sure.
Oh,
And
so
I would
dapper.
so dapper, not my typical type, a little preppy, a little too put together, but I don't when I was younger, he was doing it for me. Tales from the
Oh
Crypt will come
yes.
up a little bit later in our discussion today, but man, that's a show I just for God's sake HBO put it on Max. What are you doing?
I
Give us
know.
what we want.
I know. I know. I have the box set, so like I'm still a physical media queen,
Yeah.
so I have it.
Yeah, as you should be, as you should be. Well, I know you have a number of really exciting projects coming up. You talked about new Stan the Mechanic content and material, but what else is in the works for you?
Well, I'm very excited to share with the folks out there that I am part of a movie called A Taste of Youth, which was directed by Joshua R. Pangborn for Sidekick Productions. He was also at the screening of um, St. Drogo,
We
and he
met.
puts on.
He's terrific. He's so great.
He's such a sweetheart, and he does Demon Doctor and the Skeleton Crew are his main web series, but he's done a feature film now called A Taste of Youth, and he asked me to come and film a part. I can't really give away too much because he would literally kill me.
Ah,
But it's exciting. It's the first queer fat positive horror film, and made with love by a bunch of like local New York City artists. We filmed around Brooklyn last year. It's in post production. He's doing a lot of hard work to get the edit perfect. The good thing is that my character is in two like vital scenes that they could not cut, so your man Stan made it. I'm
we love
uh
that.
I love that. Like, so it's exciting. And what makes it really cool about today is just like the basic premise is, A Taste of Youth is basically about a mystical elixir that people will go to great lengths to consume to reattain their youth. And that's literally all I can say about it. So,
Do we have a
yeah.
release date yet? I need to get Joshua on the podcast.
Yes, where he told me that he's aiming for like the Halloween kind of
Cool.
film festival circuit season. So I don't know. Like I know he's working very hard on it, and we can't
Yeah.
wait for it to come out. So
Yeah. That's so exciting. Congratulations.
thank you. I can't wait for everyone to
Yeah.
see it.
Yeah, that's such a hot topic, amongst the gay community for sure. Kind of youth and preserving it and appearing young, and of course, it's the entire plot of the film that we're talking about today. What? This is going to sound like a silly question. What is it about youth that is so appealing to people?
I think it's vitality for
Mm,
me, at least now. Like I'm 42, so for me it's like when I dream wistfully about youth, it's not about being quote hotter or anything. It's just about my body not hurting and
mhm.
just being able to do things that I couldn't do. But I think mainstream wise our culture's very looks focused and stuff like that. So I think the movie tackles it, and the queer community, especially gay men, are very youth obsessed because its culture is driven by beauty, desirability, and we trade power in our looks and stuff like that. So that's why I love the film so much. It's a scathing takedown of all that.
Big time.
But it's the world we live in, so you know
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, I can't wait to get into discussing the film, but every episode I like to make a couple horror recommendations of media we've recently consumed and enjoyed. Films, books, TV, video games, music, anything you got. What have you enjoyed recently?
Okay, so this is going to be controversial, and it's not brand new. So either your listeners are going to love or hate me completely, but I'm a very big exploitation and like extreme horror fan.
Nice.
So like French extremism is great. So I decided to go into novels. So I read this book. It's not new, but it's very famous in like the splatter community. It's called Dead Inside by Chandler Morrison. Have you read that?
No, but I have heard tell of it.
Yeah,
It's
it
like
is.
people whisper about this book.
It is. It is really terrible, but like for me in the best ways possible. Like
Nice.
it's not like award-winning writing by any means, but the subject matter, I mean, trigger warnings up the wazoo. If you do not like extremism, there's some like sexual assault stuff in there.
Mm.
There's a lot. It doesn't hang on the balance of that, but our two main characters, and this is giving nothing away. One is a necrophiliac and one is a cannibal. And there's a love story there, and that's really all I could say. It's I don't want to spoil it for anybody. It is the most bonkers, over the top, but endlessly entertaining. Like, it's a short book. I devoured it in like 2 sittings, and I'm like a slow reader. So
Nice. I'm
that's
adding
what
it
I've
to
been
my
reading.
list. When was it published? Do you know?
I'm not 100%. I'm gonna guess about 10 years ago or so.
Okay.
I feel because he's had a lot of books since then, but it's a very divisive book amongst the horror aficionados. But
Yeah.
listen, if you're looking for something that's really gonna shock you, I'm like shock proof, and there is one scene in this book that I was like, I could not believe the filth I was reading. So I loved it, and I ordered all the rest of his books at the conclusion of that. So there you have it. So if you're looking for something extreme, Dead Inside.
I'm probably going to bump it up on my list, I think, because it's been a year of reading for me, except for this month. I've been a little bit behind, but I promised myself I wouldn't buy any more books until I have finished all of the ones that I have read. But that one's been on my list for so long. It's just, I'm looking at it right now from across the room. House of Leaves is staring me in the eye, like right in the face. And I can't fucking get through that book, but I'm going to. It's good. It's just fucking hard.
Yes.
It's a hard read.
Yes.
I feel like I need like a college course to get me through this book.
I hear you.
Yeah,
Oof.
cool. All right. Well, my recommendation this week is, by the time this episode comes out, the film will have been out a couple of weeks already. But a friend of mine, a friend who listens to the podcast, Matt, talked to me about this film that I wasn't super excited about, and it's not really a subgenre that I enjoy. But he and I went to go see a film called Immaculate together, and I gotta say, here's my setup for this. I don't really care for religious horror most of the time. And I certainly don't care for like Catholic horror, because I feel like once you've seen one of these films, you've seen them all. They're all
For
they all
sure.
take place in the same setting. So they oftentimes look similar. And when it comes to kind of possession, with the exception of The Exorcist, which is a perfect film and I adore it, possession films don't frighten me because I don't believe in God or the devil. So the stakes aren't really there for me. And they all do the exact same thing, right? So I saw
Sure.
the trailer for Immaculate and I was like, this looks like The Nun 3. And the first two didn't impress me. And, but decided, hey, I'm going to go see this. Matt, you want to come with me? We go see it. And we were floored with this film. I did not. Have you seen it yet?
No, my friend was saying like this week we need to go check it out. Now you're getting me like really excited for
So
it.
here's the thing, and I don't let anybody talk about this movie except this. These filmmakers made a very bold choice in kind of the plot progression and beats that they take, and I think it was really clever. I can't go into detail because I don't want to ruin this for anybody, except to say I don't think this movie is what you think it is, and I really really hope that it gets the accolades that it deserves, because I think Sydney Sweeney does an excellent job carrying this film. She produced it. She, from what I understand, auditioned for this film when she was 14 years old, and it took place at a
Wow.
boarding school back then. When she got older, she bought the rights, had it rewritten. It now takes place at a convent, and she hired the director herself and was like,
Smart.
I'm getting this movie made. Yeah, and she's so good in it.
Love that. That's the wave of the future, like producing your own like material that you own for
Yeah.
sure. Good for her. I love to hear that.
Yeah. All it takes is being on a popular HBO series
Sure.
first and making that kind of money.
Sure.
Yeah, but no, Immaculate really, it just surpassed my expectations and then some, and so I recommend it. I know everyone's talking about Late Night with the Devil. I'll be honest, I didn't love it. I really,
Mm.
I was sitting there and I was like, I like this. Yeah, I like it. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, this is like a less scary version of Ghostwatch.
Oh,
That's my hot take. I know, but it's super popular and I'm really glad that it's doing well. We love indie horror.
yes, yes, we do.
All right. Well, we gathered here to discuss a film. What do you say we go trick or treating?
Ooh, let's do it.
All right. Today we are discussing Death Becomes Her, 1992, directed by Robert Zemeckis. Such an outlier from the rest of his films in his like repertoire, don't you think?
Oh my God, so left field for him, but I'm so glad he did it.
I am too. I gotta say, his sensibilities, I think, add so much to this film, and it's so iconic within the queer community, right? This is just despite being made by a straight man, I feel that he knew who he was making this movie for.
Yeah, they've talked about that. I think someone got Meryl on record saying that, like, when she was done, she knew, like, the queer community would really respond to this movie, which is awesome because they're very proud of the fact that we love it. We took it under our wing, and it's a cult classic in our community. But I don't know, like some of the lines and everything, like how can a queer person not be involved on some major creative level? Like I looked up the writers, they don't seem to be queer either. I'm just like, I don't know, man, but kudos to them because wow.
Genuinely, and just larger than life characters. There's a draggy, like a drag aspect to the comedic beats in this film, kind of the dragging one another and the bickering. And it's just, I've seen two drag queens go at it. Like, give two drag queens a couple of shovels and they're gonna they're gonna give us what this.
Immediately
Yeah.
give any two gay men shovels and they're gonna reenact the scene from Death Becomes Her. It's guaranteed. I mean,
Exactly.
I saw two fierce drag queens out in P-Town for Spooky Bear a couple of years ago, and it was the best, most flawless reproduction of those costumes I've ever seen. So yeah, the queers love it. I mean, Jinx Monsoon from RuPaul's Drag Race. I'm not sure how many fans out there of Drag Race or Jinx, but she's famously said like how much the movie influenced her, and she is one of the most famous drag queens ever.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So
coming to off Broadway to play Audrey in Little Shop of Horrors. If we're talking about horror, by
yes.
the way, yeah, I'm dying to see that.
Oh yeah, she's killer. I don't know if you've never seen her perform. She is one of the best live
Yeah,
performers.
yeah.
She's amazing. So yeah, and apparently this movie had a very big influence on having her just to decide to go into drag in the first place. So,
It's
and I could see why.
Well, then thank you, Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn. This movie was written by Martin Donovan and David Coop, who wrote Jurassic Park and Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, A Stir of Echoes. Like, this man's career is wild.
It is.
Score by Alan Silvestri, who composed the music for Forrest Gump and The Polar Express. The score in this film, every time I start this movie, as soon as the music starts up, I get giddy.
Yeah.
It's got
Yep.
this like sinister. It's just it reminds me of like Danny Elfman by way of John Williams.
Yes, that's a perfect way to put it because
Thank you.
a lot of this movie, like I have in my notes saying like Beetlejuice vibes, Tim
Yes.
Burton vibes, for sure. So, and that very much ties into that. Yeah.
And one more creative behind the scenes person I have to mention is cinematography by Dean Cundey.
Oh my God, that was I'm a Halloween geek, so I saw that and was
Yeah.
like, yes, the cinematographer from the original Halloween, honey.
And the fog
Yes.
and the thing and Jurassic Park, like what a career. And his oeuvre of experience, I think, really shows in this film because the movie really captures an old Hollywood feel in many ways, as filmed
100%.
like a horror movie. It just captures a gothic essence,
Yes.
in some excellent ways. And there's a particular shot a little later on that I'll talk about when we get to it that I absolutely know was his idea. It must have been. What I love about the shots in this film, there are so many long panning shots, kind of
Yep.
multiple stories of houses, or like when they're in the Broadway theater and it's back and forth between the house to the stage. And it's like, it's a really impressive feat of filmmaking when you can stage all of these things happening at once and get that camera right on where it needs to be. Everyone's hitting their marks right when they need to. It's a feat.
Oh yeah, he's a genius. Yeah, I love his work. I mean, and to find out that he had a hand in this, I'm like, yeah, of course. I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. The film did not do well in the box office
I
at
know.
all. Let's start with this. What is your relationship to Death Becomes Her?
So it came out in 92, and in 92 I was 11. So I didn't see it when it first came out, but I do remember watching it over and over again on cable. It had to be like on Cinemax or HBO a lot in the
Yeah.
90s when I was growing up. So I couldn't tell you when the first time I saw it was, but I know I watched it over and over and over and over again. And like, there's just certain beats and line deliveries and everything. And like, of course, then your sexuality is just developing, but somehow I was obsessed with that movie, before I even knew who I was as a queer person. So I don't know. It's nostalgic to me. And, I haven't watched it terribly often since hitting adulthood, but like rewatching it in preparation for this was great. It holds up like it was yesterday. I love it still. So
Yeah, it does. I think as a little gay kid, seeing these powerful women, all three of them, right? Let's consider Isabella Rossellini as well. And then if I consider Bruce Willis, who is so cast against type in this film, right?
yeah.
Die Hard and just very much an action hero, to play this kind of wimpy, whimpering little shell of a man, I think it kind of flipped on my head the definition of masculinity, perhaps, of like Bruce Willis
Mm.
and also what acting can do. If I'm perfectly honest, this might be my favorite Bruce Willis movie.
Whoa, that is a mouthful, sir. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, it is. I'll say it boldly.
Yeah.
This movie, just like you, it was on TV a lot, and my mom really liked this movie, but I know I never saw this movie start to finish until many, many years later. It was a movie that like would be on TV and I'd walk into the room and it would be on, or I'd change the channel, it would be on. So I saw it in bits and pieces for a lot of my childhood, and I didn't see it all the way through until probably my early 20s, maybe.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, it all kind of made a lot more sense, but I was so drawn to the special effects in this film, the performances. I mean, this film, as I mentioned, did poorly in the box office, but it won the Oscar for best
Yeah.
special effects. This film created new avenues with which to showcase special effects. When I was in elementary school, there was a production crew that came in and talked to us all, kind of like, hey, kids, we'll teach you about movie making. And they were talking to us about blue screen and how it works. And they, they had pulled one kid up and they put a blue sheet over his head and it looked like he was headless. And the guy who was running it, he said, yeah, this is how they did in Death Becomes Her, the hole in
Yeah.
Goldie Hawn's stomach. And he was like, who knows that? And I was the only kid who was like, me, 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 me.
Oh, I love it.
And he clocked me. I was like when Bruce Willis is in Madeline Ashton's show and he's like clapping for it, like that was me when he said Death Becomes Her. But I was the little gay kid who knew too much about Hollywood.
I love it. No, I mean, it's getting its due now, especially in that respect, because this film is considered like the bridge between the old way of doing special effects and, the CGI that's come to dominate it, and they use both in this movie. Like,
Mm-hmm.
some of the set pieces are, scaled miniatures, which is old school, but
Mm-hmm.
then again, you have the whole, Goldie Hawn with the hole in her stomach and Meryl Streep's twisted head. That's all very, new and of the time and cutting edge. And I was reading how even Photoshop was kind of coming into its own back then, and Photoshop played very heavily into like the design concept photos that they used, like for especially the neck design on Meryl.
Sure.
The guy used Photoshop to kind of like create the image, and then he was like, then they were able to use the computer graphics to match what he actually created. So there was like perfect symmetry between the two. So I found that really fascinating. It's pretty
That's
cool.
wild. The use of animatronics and
Yeah,
puppetry as well throughout. Like there's a Meryl Streep animatronic in this movie. I want to know what happened to that. Like, is the latex rotting off of it? Is
me
there a
too.
terrifying Meryl Streep robot somewhere in a
For
warehouse or
real. And
something?
then there's like this vintage behind the scenes reel, and they show like Meryl Streep like with a blue bag over her head
Yeah.
doing all like the special effects sequences for like the part where she first falls down the staircase. And I was just like, wild to have Miss Meryl Streep herself with a bag over her face in a movie. Living for
Yeah.
it though. Like, she's game, she's up for anything. So
She read
kudos to
this.
her. But I heard she really hated the special effects aspect of it.
I heard that too. Yeah, I also I heard that her mother visited the set the day that they had the blue bag over her head, and her mom was like,
Yeah.
Marilyn, what's happening here? Like, you are a very talented award-winning actress. And she was like, no, mom, it's this new technology. You got to trust me. This is going to be great.
As much affection as she has for now, I think she said like it was one and done in terms of special effects films, because she didn't like the precision, and like,
Yeah.
it has to be very precise, and you got to be really on your mark, and even a few like centimeters, if you move to the left, you're going to mess up the whole shot,
Yeah.
especially with that scene where they had to perfectly align her face with her body. But we'll get to that. No
We'll get to
spoilers, no
that. We'll get to
spoilers.
that. We are at a point now when the special effects, you can see how it was done, but they still look fucking amazing. And if I'm perfectly honest, some of them look better than special effects today. When she stretches her head up, it looks great. It still
Yeah.
does, and when her head's on backwards, you can see we get it.
Yeah.
But the use of practical with CGI is deserves so much applause, because they accomplished remarkable things in a time when no one had ever seen stuff like this.
Agreed. Groundbreaking for sure.
Yeah. It didn't do well in theaters, as I mentioned, and I feel that it has a little bit to do with, especially in 1992, it was a very harsh criticism of something that I think people really delighted in, kind of making fun of, right? Which is older actresses, which is aging, which is criticizing women for having plastic surgery back then at that time, and today it's kind of celebrated, and every week the Kardashians got a new nose going, and it's just it's an empowering choice, and it should be. It's your body, do it whatever you want with it, right? But at the time, I think Meryl was maybe 43 and Goldie Hawn was 47 when they made this film, and so they fit in that age bracket. They look fucking incredible, right?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, this was not a time when movies were being made for women of that age group, especially to play glamorous sex pots.
Right. No, it's true. I think, and compounding on that too, they also put two of like America's most beloved actresses in roles that, I mean, let's face it, as much as we love them, like for the mass audience, the characters aren't exactly likable. They're not people you can root for. So
Sure.
I think that might have had something to do with it too, because everyone was used to seeing Meryl and Goldie in a certain light, and here they are playing, basically, ruthless, kind of vindictive, bitchy people that are
Monsters.
willing to do whatever needs to be done. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, but I think you're right. It lampoons a lot of the things that Americans held dear then and still held dear now. It's like Americans are not exactly famous for being able to accept self-critique in that way. So
No, not at all. It's also a very cynical film with a unhappy ending. Which for someone like you and I, it's a very satisfying ending, but for kind of, especially in 1992, the more plebeian movie going audience maybe expects a little more closure, and
sure.
maybe even a tad more comeuppance. But we'll get to that ending as we go along. Let's get into the plot of this film.
Let's do it.
So we start with the old school Universal Pictures logo. I just love that old school logo. I don't know why. It gives me tingles. And the iconic score starts up, those piercing strings. And I love that we get all three stars billed before the title card, all at the same time. You don't see that anymore.
Nope.
We fade in on Broadway in 1978 as Madeline Ashton, played by Meryl Streep, is performing in a new musical called Songbird, which is a musical adaptation of Sweet Bird of Youth, which is a film. It was remade with Elizabeth Taylor. Oh, I can't remember who was in the original version, but it's essentially about an aging actress, right?
Yeah.
In this opening at the Fairbanks Theater, and we see audience members walking out in disgust. It's remarking that it's awful, and one woman says, Madeline Ashton, talk about waking the dead.
I mean, meanwhile, like I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is glorious. What are they talking about? It goes from like a retro like pop ballad into a disco number.
Yes!
Hello, like sign me up. I don't know what they're talking about.
There are like 6 different like styles of music in this one number, and then they do like a ooh, ooh. It's just
I was in it to win it. I wish something like that was on Broadway. Let's be real.
Insane to see. I remember when Mamma Mia came out and everyone was like, can Meryl Streep even sing? And I was like, Didn't anyone see Death Becomes Her?
Hello. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we get this all one continuous pan into the audience. More people are standing up and walking out. Meryl is frankly dancing better than I thought she'd be able to, you know?
Hmm.
Ernest Menville, played by Bruce Willis, watches from the house with Helen Sharp, his fiance, and she looks miserable and nervous. And he just is in awe watching Madeline on stage. And he says she's sensational. At the end of the number, Ernest is the only person who stands up and cheers and gives this standing ovation because everyone else is walking out still angry about this horrible production that, like you said,
Crazy. I mean, and even if not for that, with the amount of money that you pay to see a Broadway show, I mean, I know we're in 78 here, but like I'm staying until the end, even if I hate it. Let's be real. Like,
oh yeah, yeah. I've sat through bad theater just because I had to pay a certain amount of money to get in there.
100%. No way.
Now we cut to Madeline's dressing room where she is looking into the mirror intimately at her face, and she says, "Wrinkle, wrinkle, little star. Hope they never see the scars." I'm going to tell you right now, this synopsis was so hard to write without just copying the entire
The
screenplay.
script, I
It's
can imagine. Yeah.
it's so endlessly quotable. So Helen and Ernest visit Madeline in her dressing room. I only realized on this last viewing, the woman who is Madeline's assistant, Rose, in this scene, is
Mhm.
her housekeeper later.
Oh, wow. I never put that together, but I love that continuity.
Yeah, she's still employed by her.
So she knows how she is.
Well, I love when she tells Madeline that Helen is here to see her. She goes, "How does she look?" We instantly know what their relationship is, right?
Uh-huh.
Helen walks in and they greet one another with "Mad hell." It's
Oh,
fake
I
as
love it.
fuck. Madeline embraces Helen and kisses her on the cheek, and it leaves this obnoxious red lipstick mark on her cheek. It's so good.
Chef's kiss. Love it.
Yes, yes. It's just marking her territory. Helen introduces Madeline to her fiance, Ernest. He's a famous plastic surgeon who also happens to be a massive Madeline Ashton fan. Madeline and Ernest clearly hit it off and they flirt right in front of Helen. And I love she tells him, "Tell me, Doc, do you think that I'm starting to need you?"
Mm, mm, mm.
Helen is not happy about this. We cut to Ernest prepping for an eye lift procedure and it pans away from the eyeball, but then he comments on all of the blood and he happens to look out the window of this operating room and see Madeline standing there with champagne and flowers and champagne flutes, which how did she get there? I have no idea. But then his hand is covered in blood. And we cut to Helen wringing a handkerchief in her hands. I actually love that as a character choice because it's just
Yes.
not something that you see, but it's such a like sad sight.
Yeah, yeah. And also like just Goldie, like how mousy and unassuming they made her. I know it's on purpose to like to make her in stark contrast to
Mhm.
Madeline Ashton, but yeah,
She's
they made
homely.
very homely, yeah, mousy, like not Goldie Hawn at
Yeah.
all. But yes, wringing the handkerchief nerves. I love it.
And we learn that she has lost men to Madeline before, and that's why she wanted to introduce them before they got married to make sure he could pass the Madeline Ashton test. She gets like really upset. She says, I just don't know what I would do if it happens again." Ernest assures her that he has absolutely no interest in Madeline Ashton. And then we get a punchline cut to Ernest and Madeline's wedding day. And they're walking down the aisle, hand in arm, and the wedding march is playing. And Helen watches with misty eyes. And she clenches a fist over a handkerchief so tightly that it draws blood.
Yes. Oh,
So dramatic, just so
yes.
like,
So good.
yeah.
Just so good. Love it.
I love how fast the first 10 to 15 minutes of this movie move, because if you're not on board by then, you are not going to like the rest of this movie.
100%. That's one of the things I love most about the movie. The pacing for
Mhm.
me is wonderful. I
Yeah.
love a tight one and done. Like, I'm kind of like the shorter the better. I mean, this is like an hour and 40, which is fine, but the pacing's great in this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There's not a moment wasted at
No.
all. It moves
Mm-mm.
so well. We do cut to 7 years later. Helen has put on quite a bit of weight. It's a close up of her ass. which happens frequently throughout this film. We get a lot of close-ups of the character's ass. She's let herself go. She's unkept. Her hair looks terrible. She's living in filth. There are cats everywhere. She opens a cupboard and there's a cat inside, and there's also just cans of frosting on a shelf. She grabs one and starts eating it with her fingers. And
I mean, listen, we've all been there, right?
We've all been there.
That was me like last week. So I'm
I
with you, Helen, girl.
I have taken Pringles and spread chocolate frosting on them. You get that sweet and salty. It's like a college kid's snack, but
I live.
Yeah. All right. So she's eating it with her fingers and she sits in front of the TV and turns it on. And it turns out to be a Madeline Ashton movie. Her landlord starts banging on the door with her final eviction notice, but she just turns up the volume in delight as Madeline is strangled to death on screen. And for Meryl Streep to be such a remarkable actress in real life, it takes a lot of talent to be such a bad actress on camera.
Right.
Like, she's being strangled and then she like licks her lips, or it's just so
ridiculous. And they got Michael Caine to do this cameo apparently as well,
that's right,
which is incredible. Yeah. I mean, it was very Hitchcockian. Like the way she's dressed was very reminiscent of the Birds or whatever. Yes. So it's like, besides Dean Cundey, I don't know who else on that cast or crew was like into horror, but it certainly is a love letter to the genre in its own way, considering that none of these people are really horror people. But yeah, like, so yeah, she looked very like beautiful, very Tippi Hedren, very like getting strangled, like living her fantasy. Hilarious. I love it.
Now, as the police bust, there is like a SWAT team busting down her door. They busted down to arrest her. She has the remote in her hand and she keeps rewinding this death scene over and over with a maniacal smile on her face as the police are dragging her out of her own apartment.
Gold. That's a scene that's ingrained in my head from childhood, just watching her rewind it over and over and just taking such delight in Meryl dying and just not being willing to be moved from her apartment until she saw her die one last time. Just absolute camp perfection. Just, I think, wonderful.
There's something about, and this is going to sound bad, watching in a film kind of like the mental descent of a female character in the 90s is so fascinating to me to watch, like Single White Female, or The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, right? Just seeing them fall apart. It's just, and this just happens within like a 30-second span. So I get that entire movie in 30 seconds.
It really does. I mean, and the suit and makeup for her was pretty intense. I mean, you know, fat suit's not great, especially this day and age, but listen, from the 90s, and obviously it definitely fed into the character, so I can accept it as you know, a big boned gal myself. So
it does. And as someone, you know, who has also experienced fluctuating weight throughout my life, it is maybe one of the only cases in a film where I actually think that it does serve the plot. Like the jokes about her size do serve the plot because it defines Madeline as a fucking monster. Right. So well. So we cut to Helen in a mental hospital group session. It's been 6 months. And it's Helen's turn to speak, and the psychiatrist is afraid to ask her, you've been so quiet, is there anything you want to talk about with the group? And Helen just says, yes, I would like to talk about Madeline Ashton. And everyone in the group starts screaming, and they can't stand it. They can't listen to her talk about Madeline Ashton one more goddamn time.
Absolutely. Oh my God. Very like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest vibes. And to bring it into the modern era, very Halloween 2018 opening scene where all the mental institution patients freak out around Michael when they show him the mask. So
absolutely.
And shout out to the therapist there. That was Alana Reed Hall from one of my favorite sitcoms as a kid, 227.
Oh,
she
really?
Played Rose, the friendly neighbor in 227.
Nice.
Yeah.
Is it Mary Jo Ripper? Anna Jo Ripper? The mom on that 70s show is
Mary Jo Rupp. Yeah, she's
Rupp. Yeah, she's one of the patients as well. All right, so it turned. She is taken into the psychiatrist's office or the therapist, and she tells her, you know, in order to move on, for any of us to move on, you have to forget about Madeline. You have to completely eliminate her. And Helen perks up at the word eliminate, and she's like, you're absolutely right. And we cut to another 7 years later, and it's Madeline and Ernest Beverly Hills mansion. And Madeline is woken up by her maid, who assures her that she's looking absolutely marvelous. And she has taped bandages around her head to avoid skin sagging. It's very Norma Desmond in
Oh,
Sunset Boulevard.
I mean, that's how my husband has to wake me up in the morning. Just, you're looking exceptionally young today, darling. Thank you.
Well, I
I think I
love.
need you to say it every day, honey.
Yes. She has received an invitation to Helen Sharp's new book launch party. The book is entitled Forever Young. And Madeline says, and eternally fat. She's so mean. She's just like, she's mean in the entire movie. And the fact that Meryl Streep can keep us like, not on her side, but rooting for her somehow, you know,
Yeah.
we relish in how fucking awful she is.
Love it.
She, when she read the screenplay, she loved it and laughed her ass off and signed on. And it was about a week after she signed on that she actually realized she was to play Madeline. She thought that she was to play Helen.
Whoa.
I can't picture anyone but Meryl Streep playing Madeline Ashton.
Agreed.
At
Yeah.
all.
Wow.
I
I
guess,
never knew that.
yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. You know, this is an example, in my opinion, of perfect casting, top to bottom. Everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's such a bizarre film that in other performers' hands, I don't think it would have gone as well.
I agree.
The
I
tone
mean,
is so strange, you know?
and the secret to good camp is playing it straight, right?
Yeah.
So you have like these powerhouse actors. So if it was given to a very hammy actress, it wouldn't have been as funny.
Yeah. This film was originally to be an episode of Tales from the Crypt, actually.
Yeah, I had heard that. That's pretty cool too.
Yeah. Well, Robert Zemeckis had directed an episode or two of that, and they saw this and decided to expand on it and make it a feature, which like is still mind blowing to me that this movie made it, you know, to a big budget Hollywood film. All right. So Ernest has passed out drunk in his office. The maid Rose brings him a Bloody Mary, and he throws the celery on the ground and just pounds it and asks for more vodka. He has a brief moment of running into Madeline in the hallway. I love she goes ghoul, like she calls him a ghoul and walks away. And he rushes to work. He is now a mortician. Right. He's an undertaker, and he's working on a famous socialite or actor who died mid-coitus with an 18-year-old woman, and his face is like cartoonishly orgasmic. This is the first touch of like a live action adaptation of a Looney Tunes cartoon that the rest of this movie is about to become, because he's so cartoonishly smiling. But we kind of, it gives us the impression that he's quite good at working on the deceased.
Right.
Madeline arrives at a fancy plastic surgery / rejuvenation office, and she's there for the book release that night. She's told she can't have another, is it like plasma separation?
Plasma separation, yeah.
It's too traumatic on her body, and you know, she has to wait six months, and Madeline says, it has been 6 months. No, it's been like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The woman who's helping her says, I can do your makeup. Makeup is pointless. Meryl's navigation through levels of maniacal line delivery is just masterful.
Oh, forget it. All I remember really from her tirade is like, you with your tits like rocks. Like,
yeah, 22-year-old skin and your tits like rocks. So, Madeline offers to pay her extra under the table, and for a second the woman might be thinking about it, but then a doctor appears behind her. I have watched this movie a million times, and I don't know how they staged this doctor appearing on the couch.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You would think he's just crouching out of frame, but the camera moves in such a way that it just is very surprising that he's able to lounge back in the brief amount of time. Whatever. So his right eyelid twitches throughout this scene.
It was very like that little clip of Katy Perry trying to fix her twitching eye. That's what I thought about immediately. Like,
yes,
a glitch in the Matrix.
Oh, that's good. He shoos the woman away. This woman has spoken with a ridiculous French accent the entire time. And then as soon as he shoos her away, catching her and maybe accepting money, she's like, of course, doctor, I'll leave right now. Like, she's got the most blatant American accent imaginable. So he mentions that Meryl had said money is no option. And she says it's not. And he says he can recommend his acquaintance, Lisa von Rumen, to help her. She's very exclusive. And he gives Madeline the address of where she can call on her and tells her it's a very, very rare select group. She takes calls day and night. And he walks out, and Madeline says, weirdo. I think she calls him a weirdo, and tears the
Yeah.
card in half and puts it in her purse. We cut to Madeline and Ernest in a limo to the book launch, and they're sitting in silence. And she just turns to him and says, could you just not breathe? Upon arrival, it appears to be a huge, lavish, popular affair. She even remarks, did she hire extras? And at the bar, Ernest speaks to this woman who turns out he had done the makeup of her aunt when she passed away. And she asks, what is your secret? And he goes off on this like detailed tirade about how he uses spray paint and just different makeups weren't working. And then he thought, well, what about mannequin paint? And it pans to the woman, and she is repulsed and disgusted, and she walks away. Madeline is nervous, but looks at the red carpet, and we see the back of this frumpy looking woman who looks like the Helen that we have come to know.
Right.
And Madeline remarks, oh, it looks like she lost a few pounds. She's fucking mean. The woman steps aside to reveal the Goldie Hawn that we all know in like a gorgeous red dress, hair the color of flame. And she turns to Ernest and says, we're leaving. Madeline starts to approach her. She loses her nerve and begins to turn around, but Helen sees her, and they do their mad hell again. This time, Helen kisses Madeline and leaves a giant lipstick mark on her cheek.
Love a good callback. Love a good callback.
It's so good. This movie has so many lines that, like, if you're not, they're just easy to miss, because she tells Madeline, my PR person told me that Madeline Ashton goes to the opening of an envelope. I didn't think you'd come, but I fired her. Well, I thought about firing her. They embrace, and Helen tells Madeline that she forgives her and she doesn't think that she stole Ernest. He went to her. It wasn't you, it was him. And I have never blamed you, ever. Later, Madeline sees Ernest and Helen walking alone together, and they catch up, and Ernest says he's wasted his life. And Helen tells him, no, she has wasted you. And she plants that same seed in his head as she did in Madeline. She's playing both sides with them.
100%. She also says a great line during that little speech, like, she's a woman from Newark, for God's sake. That's how she tears her down. Like, so it's interesting to know that Madeline Ashton's roots are in New Jersey, everybody.
Yes. Yeah. That night, Ernest watches from upstairs as Madeline leaves the mansion. And she knocks on, is it the pool boy? Is it, or just a young man that she's stooping?
I just took it as just a young man
that
she was hooking up with. Yeah.
Well, he answers shirtless, and he's young and hunky, but she realizes he's not alone, and there's a woman with him, and she sees his guest, and she's young and nubile with, we see her nude backside, and she's hurt, and they have kind of a pretty harsh conversation in a film that has been funny up until this point. This is like a really, oh my God moment, because he says, like, what do you think it's like, people seeing us together? They laugh behind our back. And he tells her, you need to find someone your own age. And she begins to cry, and then it starts pouring down rain on her.
So again, perfect, like camp, over the top, like timing.
Yes. Yeah. The thunder and lightning all throughout this movie has such an old Hollywood feel. It's like, like the big, is it the old dark house? It just, has, like that feel to it. Now we cut to Helen, who is practicing in her mirror. Madeline, I need to speak to Madeline at once, and over. And as the camera pans out, we see that she is a fucking psychopath who has set up blown up pictures of Madeline all around her mirror. She's taken the wedding picture of Madeline and Ernest, and she's like glued her face over Madeline's, and she's written the words "never again" in red lipstick above it.
Amazing. And then, like, she's got a blown up like poster of the movie she was watching where Meryl was getting killed when they were pulling her out of her apartment, and it's, what is it called, Dark Windows. So another like callback to like Hitchcock, like a combination of Rear Window and maybe Dark Shadows or whatnot.
Oh,
so
sure.
Again, another little flourish for like the genre lovers out there. So they definitely just plop that in there.
Yes.
Too. So
now,
but yeah,
Madeline,
her little shrine of hate.
It's so good. Madeline is driving recklessly in the pouring rain, and happens to glimpse her wet, like drippy self in the rearview mirror and shrieks and almost has an accident and dumps the contents of her purse to fix herself. And she sees the torn card that the doctor gave her. She pulls up to this ridiculous old Hollywood Art Deco Gothic castle of a mansion. It is my dream home.
Sure.
This was one of the miniatures that you mentioned.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
it looks gorgeous. It has the look of an old Hollywood movie, and yet it's a very convincing shot when she's looking at it through the windshield.
Yeah.
She knocks on the door, and a hunky, like Fabio type guy in a spandex, like singlet, maybe
Oh yeah,
answers.
with
Yeah.
luscious chest hair.
Oh
Woof.
man,
Yeah.
I'll take a few of those. He tells her Miss von Rumen's been expecting her, and he goes to fetch Miss von Rumen, I suppose. She's left alone, and two Dobermans exit an elevator alone by themselves and go to stand guard on either side of this elaborate box. Liesel, played by Isabella Rossellini, the choices that she makes in this film are like mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
She reveals herself from behind a chair, but she tells that hunky butler to keep your ass handy. She wears this elaborate necklace of like jewels and pins as a top and just a velvet like sarong around her waist. And that's her
As one
costume.
does.
That's
As one
it.
does.
That's absolutely all. This character, there were some interesting choices because her age is revealed in a moment to be 71. Originally, she was maybe going to be 100 years old or 1,000 years old. And there was even a moment in the screenplay when she was revealed to be Cleopatra.
You know, and I could see that too, because, you know, in my notes, even as a kid, the vibes I got from her look was very Egyptian.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Yeah, obviously it was sort of meant to be that way because the box is ornate. It's got like an Egyptian ankh on it.
Yeah.
You know, it's got the two dogs guarding it. You know, there was a lot of Egyptian like imagery and symbolism there and stuff too. So it's interesting that that was originally the intention, because I didn't know that, but that definitely reads in the character, because I was very like getting you know, Akasha, Aaliyah, Queen of the Damned vibes
very much
with her.
I think at 71, this film is obviously a fantasy and way, way over the top. And yet there are little tiny bits that drag it a little bit back down to reality. And there's something a little more viable about 71 as opposed to Cleopatra.
Yeah.
I love both choices.
I do too, but I think I understand why they did it, because it's like you said, it's way over the top, but it does maybe bring it back down to earth just a tiny bit.
Just a touch, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So Liesel explains to Madeline that she's scared of herself and of the body that she once knew. Now, meanwhile, Helen shows up at Ernest's door to speak with Madeline, but she's not there. She lets herself in, and then she ends up seducing Ernest while this is happening. Liesel, holding Madeline's hand, tells her, and this line I never caught as a kid, and it was only when I watched this again for like the millionth time a couple of years ago that this line like hit me as I approach, 40. Life's ultimate cruelty is that it offers us a taste of youth and vitality and then makes us witness our own decay. And it's like, fuck, dude, you're not wrong. Like that, I asked you earlier, what is everyone's obsession with youth? And like, that's it. You get like, you hit your prime and then you just have to watch yourself rot for the rest of your life, which sounds terrible and cynical, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And then, she says, but screw the natural law. And from that decorative box, she retrieves another decorative box. And this is the one with the ankh on it. And then from that box, she reveals like a Fabergé egg, essentially. And it like kind of bursts open and we see a vial of glowing pink liquid. She calls it a touch of magic in this world obsessed with science. A tonic, a potion. This is when she reveals, go ahead, guess how old I am. Don't flatter me. 37, 27, 3.
Gold.
So
Comedy gold.
good, so good. That's a game that every gay man has played and then immediately regretted. She reveals that she's 71 and this like catches Meryl dead in her tracks, and she explains the potion stops the aging process in its tracks and then forces it into retreat. If you drink that potion, you'll never grow 1 day older. Don't drink it and watch yourself rot. Stan the Mechanic, would you take the potion?
100%. Like there would be nothing to stop me. Yeah, sorry. I wish I was above it, but I would take it immediately.
Same. It's like would I become an Anne Rice vampire? Yes. You become your hottest self and have a bunch of vampire sex? Yes.
What's wrong with that? I mean,
You never have to wake up early in the morning either.
oh my God. Oh my, yeah.
Madeline asks how much this costs, and Liesel tells her the cost is different for everyone. And I love this detail. It'll come into play a little bit later. And she writes a number on a slip of paper and shows it to her. Madeline scoffs and begins to gather her things. So we never see the number that's on this slip of paper.
Right.
A fan of this film purchased the prop and in an interview revealed that the number on the piece of paper was $1 million.
Nice.
Which doesn't seem like, I mean, it's a lot of money. I'm not saying $1 million is not a lot of money, but like, and I guess by inflation in 1990, it would probably be about double that by now, right? So sure.
At least, yeah, for sure.
2 million for eternal life and youth. It seems fair. There, I said it.
I do what open a credit plan, start like selling BJs on the corner. I would do what needed to be done.
For sure. So Madeline has scoffed, begins gathering her things, but Liesel retrieves a dagger. She actually burns the piece of paper too in a candle.
Yeah.
She retrieves a dagger from her dress. It was the one that was holding the box closed earlier. And she pricks Madeline's finger. Ow! Would be crazy. She dips the dagger into the potion and then puts a drop of it over the wound, and it turns her hand young and free of veins or liver spots. And Meryl watches this happen and compares it to her other hand. And she just looks at Liesel and says, check okay? Madeline is told she must never tell anyone. And she may continue her public life for 10 years' time of perfect, unaged beauty. But after that time, before people become suspicious, she must disappear from public view forever. Madeline hands Liesel the check in exchange for the vial. It says bottoms up and drinks it. Liesel tells her, now a warning. Now a warning? Liesel tells her to take care of herself, that she and her body are going to be together for a long time. Take care of it. Siempre viva, live forever. And then she places a small gold pin of kind of a flowery design on Madeline's blouse. Now in the mirror, Madeline sees her, she looks in the mirror and she's disappointed, right? But then her skin begins to firm and the complexion brightens. It's almost like they turn up the saturation.
Yeah.
Her ass tightens up, and then suddenly her hair is full of life and it's light and bouncy, and her breasts rise and come together, which was done originally. It was going to be like wires and strings that did it, and it wasn't working. Ooh. So it's actually her costume dresser reaching behind her out of frame, lifting her breasts up and pushing them together.
Wow.
Yeah.
She is committed. I mean,
yeah. And then suddenly she has a tiny waist again, and she looks at the hunky bodyguard and says, "I'm a girl."
That made me laugh so hard. And then he's like, "Shh,
yes,
it's so gay. I love it."
Ernest and Helen are passionately making out, and Helen tells him that she has ruined his career, breaking his heart and stealing his pride, flaunting her lovers all over town. He says, "You people know about that? Of course, it's all anyone was talking about at the party."
Bitch.
He decides then and there to divorce Madeline, but Helen reminds him that divorce in California, that's exactly what she wants you to do. And Helen devises a plan to kill Madeline in this elaborate, ridiculous fantasy sequence.
Wonderful as well. And
so good.
Also, like, to point out, like, she is the embodiment of Jessica Rabbit in the scene.
Yeah.
Can we agree? Like, talk about Zemeckis referencing himself. Like,
yeah.
Goldie Hawn becomes like Jessica Rabbit, and she's like, I used to be shy and I could never say the word sex. And then she's like, sex, sex, sexual. I was like, bitch, you better fucking do it. Like, I
Yes.
was so all over it. But
I
yeah, I
gotta
just
say,
wanted to.
her delivery of that moment like turned me on watching it.
Yeah.
I was just like, fuck, she could take me right now.
Yeah. I mean,
I
in
would
that,
fall for this.
oh, that red dress, the
I
slit
know.
all the way up.
That's
I
a
mean,
and the red hair, that's a great fucking point. That's very
yeah,
Jessica Rabbit.
totally.
So the plan is to drug Madeline, load her in a car, take it to the top of Mulholland Drive, pour alcohol all over the car, and drive it off a cliff in the Hollywood Hills. And we see all of this happen, and then the car explodes, and it's so over the top. And Helen and Ernest agree to this plan. Now, Madeline gets home overjoyed as Helen is sneaking off of the property. Madeline changes clothes as Ernest arrives at her bedroom door and tells her that they need to talk. And they have an argument at the top of the staircase. I love this scene. This is
Oh.
so good. But I also love, he says, "Oh, did you change your hair?" Like she looks like 30 years younger. And he's like, "Oh, something's different." They're yelling at one another, talking over one another. He calls her cheap. And this word, like, strikes a nerve.
Trigger. Yeah.
Yes,
Big
big
time.
time. I It's just, she calls him a boozy, tragic, flaccid clown. He's like, "You better watch out. You better watch what you say. Flaccid, flaccid."
Blasted.
In anger, Ernest begins to strangle Madeline over the top of the staircase, but he changes his mind. He can't do it, and he releases her. But she's unstable at the top of the stairs, and she's begging him for help. And he's like, "Should I help her? Should I help her?" And she just looks at him and goes, "Hurry up, you wimp." And he takes one finger and just pushes her as she tumbles down the stairs. And we get this, like, if you are not expecting it to come, really jarring shot of Meryl Streep's head turning backwards as her neck is broken. This movie is rated PG-13, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. They were more generous back then with what you could see, I feel like.
It's such a sexy movie, such a dark movie, and a very violent, but also the violence is so cartoonish,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I mean, another like Jessica Rabbit, cartoonish, like that's
Yeah.
the perfect word for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this falling down the staircase takes quite a while. We hear every step that she hits. It's so good. And it looks,
hilarious.
I don't know if this was a stunt person or just a really good looking dummy. But it may be both. It might have been a mixture of both.
Yeah.
But when she lands at the bottom, she is just a pile of, like, her arms are like up wrapped around her head. She is clearly dead. And Ernest descends to check her pulse, of which there is none. And he runs to the phone and he dials Helen's hotel room. And he instantly incriminates himself. "Hello, Helen. It's me, Ernest Menville." You idiot. He tells her he's pushed Madeline down the stairs and he never thought he'd be able to do it. But he did it. And now she's dead and we're free and we can be together. And Helen's like, did you call me before the police?" She tells him, "Hang up and call the police and tell them that we were on the phone when she fell down the stairs by herself." Now, while all of this is happening, Madeline's body is behind him and it begins to stir. This scene, and I only realized it after I found out that Dean Cundey had done this film. Ernest is like sitting on the ground. We see Madeline sit up and do the Michael Myers
Oh yeah.
in Halloween, like ab crunches, sit up, and it's just like, oh, how did I never notice this before? She is absolutely pulling a Michael Myers right now. It's
Yep.
so cool. She stumbles around in the background, and as she's approaching and comes into focus in the frame, we see that her head is twisted around backwards. She's walking backwards. Now, as you said, Meryl had a blue bag over her head. They filmed her walking backwards first with a blue bag over her head, and then they attached her to some kind of chair that jerked her around with only her head showing, and then they put the two together with computer, and it's an impressive feat.
Yeah, especially for the time.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, you can kind of see it now, like how it's done, but then, I mean, people had never seen this before.
Yeah.
And she just tells Ernest, "You pushed me down the stairs." And he screams and he falls to the ground, telling her to stay away from him. And she says she has to make a phone call, but she can't figure out how to walk because her head's on backwards. I love, she goes, 911, right? "You're in the shit house now, pal." And Ernest tells her to look at herself, and she looks down and realizes, "Ernest, I can see my ass. And he tells her there's something wrong with your neck too. And she tries to sit on a piano bench and falls. And he assures her it's a dislocated neck. It happens. And she ends up spinning it back around. And so now it's front facing, but her neck and collarbones are like protruding under the skin. So he rushes her to the ER where a doctor examines her. He bends her wrist all the way backward, asking if it hurts. And she's just like, nope, nope, doesn't hurt. Ernest, you can see him pulling from his flask behind them. And when she removes her coat and reveals her neck, the doctor has a frightened reaction. And at Ernest's suggestion, he says, maybe check her for shock. But he finds no heartbeat with his stethoscope. But the doctor's freaked the fuck out. He like startles himself when he taps on the stethoscope to make sure it's working. He checks her temperature and asks Ernest, he was like, all right, can I get a sip of that flask? Like, this doctor is shaken. And he tells them that her wrist is fractured in at least 3 places, and she has shattered 2 vertebrae, from what he can tell without an x-ray. The bone protrusion through the skin is not a good sign, and her temperature is below 80, and her heart is stopped. Well, what does that mean? He goes for a second opinion. Now, Madeline is fussy, and Ernest tells her she's in violation of every natural law he's ever known. And he screams that she's dead, and he runs for help. And Madeline faints when he leaves the room. Now, Ernest can't find any doctors anywhere because it turns out they're all trying to revive Madeline's doctor with defibrillators. So he is having a fucking heart attack.
For sure. Can we talk about the decor of that hospital too?
Okay.
It really jarring. It was like Blanche's bedroom from the Golden Girls.
What is happening in that waiting room?
The palm wallpaper. I was like, this was a choice. And I don't know if it just adds to the cartoony, like outlandish feel of it, or I don't know. Did you have any thoughts on that?
I did. Is it because it was Beverly Hills?
I don't know. Like if it was Miami, I'd get it, just because to me it's so tied into Miami, that wallpaper. But
yeah,
I don't know.
No, it's a very bold choice because it's a very lavishly decorated waiting room. I have to wonder, there are many scenes that were cut from this film that have not been released. The deleted scenes are not available, and I have to wonder if it's tied in to one of those, because we're about to come across another scene that is missing something as well.
Yeah.
So he returns to the hotel room. He returns to the hospital room, and Madeline is gone. And he's told by a nurse that she's dead and she's been taken to the morgue. And he says, "The morgue? She'll be furious!" and runs to her. He rushes down this eerie hallway, and these 3 nuns seem to float past him. So these nuns are there because it was cut. When he goes into the morgue, the first door that he opens was the corpse of a priest.
Oh, good. See, I was wondering, because I'm just like, why are these Nightmare on Elm Street floating nuns all of a sudden in this movie? Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
They remind me. Have you ever seen High Spirits with Daryl Hannah and Steve Guttenberg?
No, actually, I haven't.
Oh my god. Oh, can't recommend it enough. But there's a scary nun moment similar to that. It's like a ghost sex comedy that it's not great, but it's not great, but it's also great. Anyway, all right. So he enters the morgue. He hears knocking from one of the drawers and opens it, unzips the bag, and there's Madeline. She's now blue, basically, and she's very upset. "Ernest, I'm in the morgue." He deduces that Madeline is a sign. She's a burning bush. It's a miracle! And it's very lightning crashes. It's very much, it's alive from Frankenstein.
Yes. And that set piece in particular struck me as very Tim Burton-esque, like the colors, the lighting, all of that. So yeah, we're very we're in heightened reality now, obviously, because he's talking to a living corpse. But yes.
I also love that the morgue has marble decor, like the walls are made of marble. Which, all right, so maybe that's where we're going with the waiting room being so lavish. This is Beverly Hills, so everything's just opulent and over the top. Yeah. Ernest drives to the mansion and opens the gate, and Helen, looking sexy as hell in black leather and like a black beret, to kind of not be seen, appears on in binoculars and sees him drag Helen's corpse out of the car.
Amazing.
She climbs over the fence, and it's hilarious because it's clearly a stunt double who does it. They do a flip over the fence, but then she pops up into frame and is nearly hit by Ernest's car when he drives off like a maniac. So Helen follows him in her car, and he's driven to the funeral home where she sees him loading his trunk with formaldehyde. We cut to Ernest pumping Madeline with chemicals, and he's spray painting her legs and ass. He runs downstairs for turpentine and finds Helen there holding a shovel, tarp, and rope. And she asks, "Where is Helen? Why does he have paint on his hands?" She starts to head upstairs, but Ernest pulls her out to the garden where they discuss the plan to murder Madeline. Now, Madeline's standing at the top of the stairs. We just see her hand, and her like fingernails act as claws, scratching the woodwork because Helen is revealing the plan. And then she says, Ernest, she was a man-eater and she was a bad actress. That's the final straw for Madeline.
I mean, and that's also like callback to very like, you know, Universal monsters and stuff like that, that shot. And then like just one of my favorite lines of the whole movie, like before he goes down to see Helen, he's doing her makeup, Madeline's makeup, and he's and he needs the turpentine because he fucks up on the eyes, but he says, the highlights of your eyes are completely unbalanced. Do you want people to stare? That's why I'm like, a gay person had something to do with the script. You're lying.
No,
you're lying.
For sure. I rewound it because his delivery is so serious. He's like, do you want
yes,
like he's so sincere. Bruce Willis,
so good.
Like unexpected.
Do you want people to stare? I mean, he's right.
Ernest tells Helen that Madeline's not dead, and Helen says, "Fine, that's ridiculous. If she's not dead, tell her to come down here and kiss me on the." And we hear Madeline's echoey voice, "Kiss you on the what?" And Madeline is standing halfway down the stairs watching. They do their mad hell. And Ernest says, "Darling." And Helen whispers, "It's alive." As Madeline walks away, she just walks right past them. Ernest follows her. And when she returns, she has grabbed a shotgun from the cabinet and approaches Helen and just tells her, "You brought this on yourself," and blasts Helen into the sky. She flies through the sky and lands into the pond. They threw a stunt woman like 30 feet back to achieve this shot. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah, good shot.
There's so much of this that would be just CGI. Like this movie, if it were made today, would look so different. There's been talk of a remake. There was one like Anne Hathaway and Kate Hudson, actually, Goldie Hawn's daughter. That was a rumor for a minute. Lady Gaga was to play Liesel.
Ooh.
Yeah, it is. It's coming to. It's there's a musical adaptation as well. Yeah. Opening in Chicago, probably coming to New York at some point. With,
for sure. Yeah, it opens at April 30th. It's opening.
Yeah, like super soon. Megan Hilty is Madeline, and Jennifer Samard is Helen.
Yeah,
and they've been putting out little ads of the two of them bickering, and it's pretty cute. I'm curious.
So good. And Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child apparently is playing the Liesel role.
Really?
But they changed the name of the character. It's Viola Van Horn is the name of like Isabella Rossellini's character now, and it's Michelle Williams from Destiny's Child. Hey, whatever.
A,
I'm into it.
That's a great name. B, I did not know that Michelle Williams was in this. Oh man, so I am sick to death of movies being turned into musicals. But yeah, I need this one.
I'm excited. I'm gonna go see it. Yeah. It's we'd be lying if we said we wouldn't.
Of course. So all right, so Ernest screams and he runs to call the police and pour himself a drink. And Madeline's yelling at him and tells him that they're going to go bury Helen in Death Valley. And she threatens to call the police and play dead on their arrival if he doesn't help her. So he retreats to get the shovels. Madeline says, "Oh, she even paid for the hardware." And they lay out a tarp. And while they're working, Helen rises from the water, revealing a hole in the middle of her stomach. So her standing up is a puppet. So that's how we get the water gushing from the hole in her stomach, which is also so cartoonish because without a spinal cord, this is impossible.
Yeah. I mean, I read that they did a few versions of it. Like there was a really gory one with spinal cord and organs and everything, but then they thought it pushed it too much into horror. So they got rid of that and made it the clean hole that we're used to. We all love a clean hole. I mean,
big proponents of a clean hole on the podcast.
Yes, ma'am.
As much of a gore hound as I am, I don't need it in this movie.
Yeah, not in this movie.
It doesn't match the rest of what we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree. And
Ernest, he sees her and says, "Oh, it's another miracle." Helen says, "Look at me. I'm soaking wet." And Ernest says, "And there seems to be something wrong with your blouse." And Madeline realizes that Helen is wearing the same gold pin that Liesel had given her. And, "You took the potion. You took it too." Well, Madeline says, "I hardly needed it." We learned that Helen took it back in 1985. Madeline asks her, "What did it cost you?" And Helen says, "It cost me everything I had, and that was cheap. I think this is an interesting point, that the cost is different for everyone. That's what Liesl
Right.
told her, right? Helen
Right.
was not a wealthy person. In fact, she was quite poor. So she could have paid $200 for this potion. I think that for Liesl, it may be a little bit more of like the person she's giving it to than the money.
Yeah, yeah, which you don't
It's-
really get from the character right away, but yeah, it adds levels to her character without like her being in the scene at all. So yeah, clearly she took some sort of pity or connected with Helen in some way. But
Yeah,
then she goes ahead and sells the potion to her rival anyway. So
yeah.
what does that say about
Right,
Liesl?
of
So
course.
yeah.
Yeah. Now Ernest says he just has an epiphany. Wait a second. I don't think this is a miracle at all. The women have this wonderful scene going back and forth at one another. Meryl Streep looks through the hole in her stomach and says, I can see right through you.
Perfect.
Helen grabs a shovel when Madeline isn't looking. She says something bitchy and turns her back, and she knocks her head with it, knocking it backward. And just fix this. And she fixes her head. And then Helen tosses her a shovel. On guard, bitch. And they continue to battle and bicker with one another as Ernest goes upstairs to lay down. And we see the women's shadows fighting in the light of the fireplace. It's such a great shot. It's so
It
good.
is.
Now, Madeline's shovel breaks and she throws it through Helen's hole in the stomach like a javelin. And Helen whops Madeline's head down into her neck. And she lists the three men that Madeline stole from her. Madeline stretches her head back up into place. It's such a Looney Tunes moment. Squash and stretch, right? That's kind of like the style of animation.
For sure.
But then, so she's fixed her neck, but it's like doubled over and stretched around the neck.
Yeah.
Madeline says it hurt her feelings when Helen never invited her to her parties as a kid. You thought I was cheap.
Word again, cheap.
Yeah.
Cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. Her head keeps falling forward, and Helen tells her, will you knock it off? I'm trying. She's like holding her head up with her fist. Helen sits down on the couch. Her hole goes around the shovel stick that's sticking out of it, and they end up apologizing to one another. They go upstairs to Ernest and they tell him that they've made up. They've figured out they've buried the hatchet, as it were. Helen's now wearing an elaborate choker around her neck to keep her head up. And he tells them he's made a decision. He grabs his dartboard. He's been throwing darts and missing this entire time, and he's going to leave. And the girls say, no, we need you to fix us, please. So he agrees on one condition. When he's done, he's leaving. You don't look for him. You don't ask for me ever again. And they're just like, yeah, I can live with that.
Yep.
So the next morning, Ernest packs his bags as the girls check their beautiful selves out in sexy lingerie, and he's filled the hole in Helen with, sawdust. Like what do you use? I don't even know. Madeline accidentally peels a little bit of the paint off of Helen's shoulder, and they realize, oh my God, we're going to need touch-ups from time to time. Like, what if it rains? And so they decide Ernest has to take the potion. He has to stay with them, but he'll never agree to do it. And Helen says, we'll drug him. They go to his room with an alcoholic beverage, clearly poison, and they hand it to him. And he gives this hopeful speech about bettering himself and keeping his word. And he'll almost take a sip and then not, and then he'll set it down and they'll hand it back to him, and he's carrying it around. And then he comes to this realization that he lived to his promise. Till death do us part. Well, you girls are dead and I'm parting. Cheers. And then instead of taking a drink, he decides, like, today's the day I quit drinking. And he pours the poison into a plant. So each one of them grabs a vase and smashes it over his head at the top of the stairs. He passes out. And he wakes up looking up at this elaborate stained glass ceiling depiction of Adam and God touching fingers, the very famous painting. What is the name of that painting? I've never known.
I think it's called The Creation of Man.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
So he's in Liesl's indoor swimming pool room, and she's doing the backstroke nude in the pool. Her hunky bodyguards give her this robe, and it's got the best collar I've ever seen in my entire life.
She gets out of the pool wearing heels, mind you.
She tells him that she had him dressed in a tux because she's throwing her annual party every spring for her clients. And she shows Ernest the box with the potion in it. She cuts his finger with the dagger, and he asks what she's doing, and she says, I'm loving you. It's such a good line. shows him the pink glowing potion. She puts a drop of it in his cut, just like she did with Madeline, and his hand turns younger. He says, "My God." And she says, "Thank you." Liesel tries to convince him to take the potion in this excellent monologue, and it builds and builds and builds, and she says, "Siempre vida, live forever," and lightning strikes, and then he stops himself from drinking it, and he's like, "What? I don't want to live forever. What am I going to do? What if I get bored? Who am I going to hang out with? Like, what if I'm lonely? Madeline and Helen? Like, that sounds awful. What if I'm maimed or I'm pushed down, fall down a flight of stairs?" I love that. He almost incriminates himself. He grabs the dagger, like chucks it across the room, and it cuts the lights in the pool room out. So he's finally thrown
all
a dart.
Of a sudden, yeah.
Yeah, thrown a dart that lands, and he makes a break for it.
Yeah. Before we leave the scene, I just wanted to mention, because I read an interview with Isabella Rossellini that she did about for the 30th anniversary of the movie, and there was always speculation whether or not that was her in the swimming pool.
Okay.
And it wasn't. She said it wasn't, because they had a talk about this character, and like she felt that Liesel was the ultimate fashion victim, like the ultimate victim to like society, who needed to be absolutely perfect, absolutely stunning. And Isabella fucking Rossellini didn't believe her body was good enough to do the scene. She was like, I think this should be like a more Barbie kind of figuresque person.
Wow.
And they put a body double in that scene for her, like which is interesting, because this is the era where she was in the sex book with Madonna.
Mm-hmm.
She had done nudity before in Blue Velvet, but she felt like her natural body served the plot in Blue Velvet, because it's a very vulnerable, fucked up scene.
Yeah.
Where they encounter her naked in that movie or whatever. But she felt for this movie, it needed to be like Hollywood Barbie perfection. So I just wanted to like throw that in there, because that's like one of the urban legends of this movie, whether or not it was her, and it wasn't, everybody.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, to make a choice to serve what your interpretation of the character is like that's pretty,
pretty dope.
Yeah, pretty dope. So Ernest finds himself in a ballroom full of beautiful people, and among them, the guests include Marilyn Monroe and Andy Warhol and Greta Garbo. The doctor Madeline saw earlier, who gave her Liesel's card, steps up and announces Liesel is on her way soon, and he reminds everyone that those of you who faked your own deaths should stop popping up to make headlines, and he points out Elvis in the crowd, who's just like, I'm trying to have a little fun. Madeline and Helen see Ernest from across the room, and he's got the potion in his pocket, and he starts to leave, and he makes his way to an elevator. He takes it up. They start to pursue. Now he's chased by Liesel's dogs, but narrowly escapes. They like rip his jacket off of him, and he climbs this really cool Gothic staircase to the roof of the mansion, where he finds there's no escape. So he starts to climb up a pipe to like a higher level of roof that'll lead him to another tower. But Madeline and Helen just enter and start screaming his name, which causes him to slip. And now he is dangling from a gutter by his suspenders, and the gutter kind of separates from the wall, and now he's just dangling over kind of this center like hole in the middle of the mansion. As he's hanging there, Helen tosses him a sheer shawl to grab onto, like that's going to do anything. It falls, and they try to convince him to drink the potion, like drink it or you'll die, and it's the only way he'll survive the fall and he can put himself back together again, which no, he could not. They get more and more aggressive with him, right? And he's whimpering and doesn't know what to do. And then this film just has like you've almost made the sale, and then you say one more thing,
right,
that ruins it, right? Like hurry up, you wimp, or
it's a callback to the top of the stairs. Yes, for sure. Like
exactly. Yeah, because Madeline yells, "You have to," and Helen says, "We need you." And Ernest says, "I'm sorry, dears, you're on your own." And he drops the potion, and it takes it a while before we hear it crash. His suspenders break instantly, and he falls multiple stories. And right before he hits what we perceive to be the ground, a light turns on, and it turns out to be that stained glass window of God and Adam, and he crashes through it and lands in the swimming pool. He has survived, and as he's getting out of the pool, Jim Morrison asks him if he's going to be done soon or what. So he hops into a car that turns out to be James Dean's, which I'm assuming is the Spider that he crashed in. I don't really know much about cars.
Yeah, me either. That's a good point, though. I knew it was James Dean, but
He's like
Good
lighting a
point.
cigarette, making the James Dean brooding face. Liesel tells Madeline and Helen, I suggest you get him back. So they go back to the mansion, but there's no sign of him. And their paint has already begun to peel. They can't find Ernest. They can't go back to Liesel, who specifically told them to take care of their bodies. And they're dead. This is so embarrassing. Is it Helen that says that, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
So Madeline says, it's maintenance. It's upkeep. Like, I'll paint your ass, you paint mine. Who'd have thought we'd end up like this, painting each other's asses every day, every night, forever? And they stop laughing at the word forever. It sinks in. Like, these women are not immortal, they are eternal, right?
Right.
They're dead. And just the idea of like the end of time, they will still be existing in consciousness. That's actually quite frightening.
That is scary.
Yeah.
Yes.
We cut to 37 years later. It's a very abrupt, like, what the hell just happened moment. We are at a funeral, and it turns out to be Ernest's funeral, where the eulogist tells everyone that he had married later in life. He said that life began at 50, and he had lots of children, which is funny because Madeline kept calling him flaccid.
Right.
And it turns out he popped out he didn't pop out, but he had like 6 or 7 kids.
6 kids, yeah.
Yeah, and he founded multiple charities that will continue to live on after his death. Now, in the back of the church, we see Mad and Hell cloaked in black. They have black veils over their faces, but through the veil, we can vaguely see that their faces look quite garish. They're snickering. And the eulogist mentions that Ernest had told tall tales about the living dead in Beverly Hills. And Helen begins to cry, which I think is an interesting character choice for Helen, because while she is a shitty person, she turns out to be a shitty person, right? I don't think she started out that way. She really did love him.
At least at one point in her life.
Point.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Madeline criticizes her for it. And when she starts to wipe away her tears, part of like the paint and her skin falls off of her face. So they're searching through a purse for the spray paint, and I must have dropped it. Well, how do you drop a giant can of spray paint? And they stand up to, let's get the hell out of here. And on their way out, they are stopped in their tracks because the eulogist says this man had, in his own way, learned the secret of eternal life. And it's here among us in his hearts and of the hearts of his friends. And the secret of eternal youth in his children and his grandchildren. And it's my opinion that our beloved Ernest is one man who will indeed live forever. And Madeline just
blah 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 blah.
Oh, it's so good. So they are walking down the front steps to the church. It's quite a steep, like, long staircase, and they lift their veils, and we finally see how awful they look. Their paint is running, and their faces are chipping, and they're rotting kind of, and they look just disgusting. And they're bickering back and forth. Well, the can of spray paint is on one of the steps, and Helen steps on it and slips, and she starts wobbling just like Madeline had at the top of the steps before she died. Madeline starts laughing at her, and she won't help her. So Helen grabs onto her and drags her down the stairs with her. They tumble. And when they reach the bottom, they both shatter. And it's so unexpected.
Yeah. The cherry on top. Like,
yeah. Their heads are kind of spinning around, and they both stop spinning, and their heads are upside down. And Helen asks Madeline, do you remember where you parked the car? And that's the end of the movie. Like, what? What's going to happen? Are they going to, like, how are they putting themselves back to, like, do you really think they're driving a car away from this?
Oh my God. It's perfect to me.
Absolutely
perfect ending.
Yeah. Do you know how this movie was supposed to end?
Yeah, I do. I think Tracy Ullman, they filmed it too. It didn't test well. Apparently, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Ernest is supposedly meets Tracy Ullman, who's a bartender. She was helped him fake his death, and then Madeline and Helen run into them years later. And I guess Ernest got his like happy ever after while they were like miserable in their eternity. But apparently it didn't test well, so they scrapped it. and did this ending, which is leagues better than
So
that
much
sounded.
better.
So
Oh,
yeah.
so much better. Yeah, audiences wanted them to get more of a comeuppance because while they are quote the heroes of the film, they're also fucking awful. And it just works. It ends like a beat before it should. It's just
Yeah.
like what the credits are rolling. Am I supposed to get up and leave now? And it's just hello. We wouldn't get the blah blah blah
Oh,
if they hadn't changed it.
that ending is like some of my favorite parts of the movie. I don't know, like it's in a movie of moments, that
Yeah,
ending sequence is just it just sends me. I think it's so funny. It's so
yeah,
dark.
yeah.
It's wonderful. I think they made the right call there with the ending.
It's just a hell of a movie and nothing else like it. All right, let's do this then. On Rick or Treat Horrorcast, there is a rating system. The movie is
Ooh.
either a trick, which means it's okay, a treat, which means you love it, or it's a smell my feet, which means it sucks. Stan.
Mhm, mhm. This is a treat, but not only a treat, this is like when you were a kid and you got like the full size chocolate bar
Yeah.
kind of treat. This movie's
Yeah.
fucking perfect. Like, so big time treat.
I it genuinely is nothing but a treat. I don't get sick of this movie. I will
Nope.
tell you this is one that I don't watch overly often because I want it to land every time. There
Yeah.
are there are like certain musicals I don't listen to the cast recording of because I want to cry every time I watch it. Like Sunday in the Park
Hmm.
with George, right? I want to cry every time. This movie, I keep it on a really high shelf. Like my friend would call this top shelf horror, where you revisit it every once in a while because it's so revered for you. And I feel the same way about that. I never want this movie to. I never want to like not be surprised by this movie, despite the fact that I can quote it start to finish.
Oh yeah. I agree with you. I hadn't watched it in a long time. I would say the last time I watched it was a couple of years ago, and then I just watched it last night. It was perfect, and I will put it back on the metaphysical shelf for another couple of years before I watch it again, just because it's perfect. To me, it's a nearly perfect film,
Yeah.
despite what people thought about it. I mean, I don't know, like you know, uh, I think people wanted something deeper. I know it was criticized that, they didn't feel there was much characterization, or there wasn't enough of an arc for them. But sometimes movies can just be entertaining, and sometimes, it's an obvious satirical takedown of like beauty standards, like, and it can have a feminist read if you want it to. It's like there's no wrong way to read it. I mean, personally, I think it's like they were stuck in this patriarchal system where like beauty is power for women, and they found a way to get ahead for themselves using that system.
Mm-hmm.
I think all the men were very secondary in this film. Like,
Yeah.
no, even Ernest himself, like he ended up just being a tool for them. Liesel's guards, Tom, Dick, and Harry, like she didn't
Yeah.
even care enough to give them real names.
No.
I mean, the men were just secondary. So I like to look at it with that feminist read. I'm not a woman. I don't know how women feel about this film, but that's what I try to take the empowerment away from it. Like they found a way to theoretically beat the system, but did they really? I don't know. But the men were kind of treated as afterthoughts, and it was about, they made these choices for themselves. Nobody made them drink the potion. Granted, they did it to be young and beautiful, but that was the rules that they had to play by in a flawed system.
Yeah.
That's my take on it. I don't know. You know.
Fuck, you just said it perfectly. I can't I echo everything you just said. There's I yeah, I completely agree. I think if a movie like this came out today, I do think it would have been better received than 1992. I think that it was such an atypical tone. The pacing, while you and I love it, is very different. Like
Yeah.
there's no clear first, second, and third act to this film. It's just all kind of like we're gonna cut, 7 years, now 7 years, now 2 days, like a night and a half span, and now 37 years later, it's very kind of all over the place. And
Yeah.
if you are like tried and true to a 3 act structure of every movie you've ever loved, that's going to throw you. I think it might receive a little more love now if we think about the kind of movies that are like a show like Wednesday. I mean, it's flowery and silly, but it's like there's like a more of an appreciation for a dark tone in things, and I think that there used to be.
Yeah, for sure.
But I appreciate the cynicism. I appreciate the horror. This absolutely I define as a horror movie for sure. And fuck, I'm just so glad it exists.
Oh, me too. And for the children to watch going forward, I'm glad it found even though Drag Race has its flaws or whatnot, the fact that one of its biggest stars like constantly promotes this movie
Yeah.
does not hurt its longevity, because
No.
these kids are so obsessed with these queens that they will check out Death Becomes Her because Jinx Monsoon loves it. And I really hope that's the case, because this movie should be required viewing for all queer people going
1000%.
forward.
1000%. Well, Stan, I am so fucking glad that you picked this movie and that you took the time to talk about it with me.
Oh my god, thank you. I love geeking out on movies like this, so this was like a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, where can my listeners stalk you?
Oh, please do. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter/X at Stan the Mechanic, all one word. I also have a YouTube channel with the handle Stan the Mechanic. And if you want to check out my existing public domain horror movies that I'm hosting, that's will be at stanthemechanic.com. Fair warning, very blue humor, very sexual, very whatnot, but it's a lot of fun. It's Elvira just taking it to the bluer next level. And
I
yeah,
wouldn't want it any other way.
yes.
Please check out this material. Stan the Mechanic is incredible to watch. So fun, so knowledgeable, and you put together this character that there's a lot of thought behind him. And so it's just, I can't wait to see what's next. I know you have some more stuff on the way.
Yes.
To follow the podcast, my website is rickretreat.com. You'll also find links to my writing. And then Instagram, TikTok, and X is at rickretreatpod. And I am Rick or Treat Horrorcast on YouTube. And that's the show. And Stan, thank you again. And we will see y'all later, spookies.
Bye.
Thanks for coming Rick or Treating. It'd be a real scream if you'd take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. The show's spooky intro and outro music is a cover of Camille Saint-Saëns's Danse Macabre, with orchestrations composed and performed by Lestat von Monlicht. My website, rickortreat.com, is designed and maintained by Evelyn DeVere. The show's social media content is created by my evil minion and social media manager, Stanley Martin. The Rick or Treat logo was designed by Philip Romano. Contact information and links to these artists can be found in the episode description. Check them out, they're frighteningly talented. Rick or Treat Horrorcast is independently produced by me, Ricky J. Duarte of Rick or Treat Productions. If you like what you heard, tell a fiend. I mean, friend. If you didn't, well, they're coming to get you, listener. Flaccid.
Flaccid.